You are about to hear a presentation by Andy Bass, filmed in front of a live audience. Andy's topic, why you can't motivate people and what to do instead.
Lovely to be here, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Before I start, just while you're settling down, this is a true story that happened to a friend of mine this weekend, and I wanted to share it with you. She lives in Moseley, and she wanted to go and see her mum in Bearwood. So if you know Birmingham well, you know that's the number 11 bus. Yeah. So she's on the number 11, going through Sturchley, Selly Oak, on the way up past Harborne. The bus gets to Selly Oak, somewhere near Sainsbury's, and 3 Chinese girls, students who are in this country studying, are talking to the bus driver, and they say, "Where's Cadbury's World?" And the bus driver says, "Oh, you've missed it. It's half a mile back that way. We've gone past it." And they were very frustrated, and my friend was laughing because the way they'd been trying to find Cadbury's World was on their smartphones. So they all had iPhones, and they were looking at the sat-nav, and their heads were down like this. And maybe the sat-nav signal took a little bit of a moment to catch up with them. Of course, had they been looking out of the window, they would have seen huge purple signs. That's right. And I think that, although this isn't the main topic of my talk today, I will come back to that later because it's very relevant just how much people are captured by these screens and how much they maybe need to look out the window and see what's going on. My actual topic, I've got a mad title here. My actual topic that Mark asked me to speak about, motivational leadership. And we had lunch a few weeks ago, and we were talking, and Mark said, "Well, can you come and talk about motivational leadership?" And I said, "Yeah, great, no problem, love to. There's just one issue though, isn't there?" And we looked at each other and we talked about our philosophies a little bit and realised that we shared the same one. And this is the issue. You can't really motivate people. It's a bit of a wild goose chase because people already are motivated. Now you might go, okay, what do I mean by that? Well, think of the laziest person you know. It might be a teenager of your acquaintance. It might be, I've got a picture of a sloth here, or sloth. It really does look like it's chilling out. It might be, I was talking to a prospective client yesterday and he said, "There's this group of people in the business that I've got a problem with because they've retired." And I thought, well, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So I said, well, how is that an issue? He says, well, they're still on the payroll for the next 2 years. So there are people who, for whatever reason, don't seem that compliant or they're not doing anything. And that looks like they're not motivated. But flip it round, because in a way they're very motivated. The question is, what are they motivated to do? They're motivated to avoid hassle, to avoid responsibility, to be comfortable, to not have to be accountable for anything. But think about them like a thermostat in a central heating system. When the temperature is just right, then the boiler doesn't need to come on and the air conditioning doesn't need to come on. And nothing seems to be happening. It looks passive, like it isn't doing anything. But if the temperature drops, the boiler should come on. If the temperature goes up, then the air conditioning will come on. In the same way, think about that lazy person you were thinking about a bit earlier. Try to get them to do something, and you will see a reservoir of motivation. Suddenly it wells up. The point is, it's not aligned to what you want them to do, and that's where the difference is. So you can't motivate people, but you can move them. And some of the motivation strategies that Mark was talking about that he said are not such a good idea, I would say, well, you can move people that way. You can threaten them, and you can bribe them, and they'll work. I know a guy who's a hypnotist. And whenever he does a public speaking, he always gets the same question, which you can probably guess, which is, can you get somebody to do something they don't want to do with hypnosis? And the research on this says no. He says 1 or 2 really skilled people might be able to, but it would take them weeks and months to condition the person adequately. But why bother? Just put a gun to their head. Right? Or metaphorically do that. You can move people. That's not what we mean though, is it? We don't want people that we're moving. We want people who've got a certain level of engagement and commitment. I think that's really the spirit of this question. And the other problem, of course, is that the slave driver is always as busy as the slaves. So that's kind of my bias, it's my perspective, and that will go through what I'm going to talk about. I do believe you can inspire people, and I believe you can enthuse people, and I believe that you can reinvigorate people as well. And but of course, to do that, You have to be inspired, you have to be enthusiastic, and you have to be invigorated. Now we're at a good time of the year because it's Christmas, and there is that lovely period of time between Christmas and New Year where I hope you're taking some break, which is always a great chance to step back a little bit and look for new ways to think about the business. It's the time people set resolutions, and often the few days away from the business, enable you to look at things a bit differently. So once you're tired of the turkey sandwiches, you might want to turn your mind to this question. And what I'd like to do is give you 3 main areas to consider that even singly, but certainly in combination, I think could help you next year to come back reinvigorated yourself with ideas for involving other people in the business. That's kind of how I propose to spend the next 20 minutes or so. Does that seem agreeable? Great. So what I do for my clients is help them to accelerate their progress on achieving strategic objectives. And what stops them usually is getting dragged into the day-to-day. The day-to-day is incredibly important, but if you just do what your inbox says every day, you won't necessarily end up where you want to go. So how do you, whether a large organisation or a small one, so that might range from quite small businesses, $1 million turnover, to a client I'm working with at the moment, which is about $316 million. It's a manufacturing organisation. So quite a range. I think the principles hold. So whatever you're doing, I think you'll find something in this. Let me show you 3 organisations, and I'd like to think about what they do as I go through. 3 organisations I think are very interesting in the way that they have communicated or do communicate with their employees. Federal Express, the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, and one particular branch of Vision Express. I'll start with Federal Express. In the old days, before they were FedEx, do you remember what their promise was?
If you don't get it there by 10 a.m, you get it for free.
And I think that was the value proposition, and the way they put it in the old adverts was when it absolutely, positively has to be there overnight. And that was their strapline, but also it had a very, very galvanising and kind of regulating effect on the way people behave in the business. Let me give you an example. In the old days, when it was Federal Express, and they could make that promise because they were an American business, now it's difficult because to go global, it's hard to say that you'll always be overnight. But when they were America only, they could say that. A friend of mine was sending a parcel. He got a call from a Federal Express agent who said to him, "Sir, I'm sorry, but your package has missed our flight. And so it's going to be delayed." To which he said, "But I thought it was when it absolutely, positively had to be there overnight." And she said, pause, "Sir, you are absolutely right. I apologise for even calling you. I will put it on the Delta flight at our expense." And it got there the next day. It's fantastic because it's a very compelling promise outside into the market, which is how it usually gets talked about. But also notice how it aligns the decision-making of frontline people. They know exactly what they should be doing. And it's kind of inspiring as well. There were great stories at FedEx about people doing all kinds of things to get the parcels through. Has that galvanising effect? Ritz-Carlton have a lovely expression. They talk about ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. I was at a Ritz-Carlton recently. A client of mine held an off-site at the Sarasota Ritz-Carlton, and I was like, well, if I have to. And what was fantastic, I saw it both from the guest's perspective, because I was staying in the hotel, but also from the perspective of if you're a conference organiser and you've got flip charts and AV and all the things that you need. The service there is excellent. To my taste, the best service in any hotel, because they are not in your face, but they're always around. So if you think you want some milk for your coffee, or if you think you need another flip chart pad, if you're running the kind of thing that I was doing, they're there. But then they kind of fade into the background when you don't need them. Ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen tells an enormous amount about how to treat guests. It also says something about how guests should behave and sets the tone of the relationship. It's a powerful organiser. Vision Express, anybody from Harborne? or know the Harborne branch of Vision Express? Do you know Ben, who runs it, the French guy?
No.
Okay, Vision Express, and I have no financial arrangement with them other than they take money off me for these every about 2 or 3 years. And the markup on frames, that's another story. Ben, or Benoit, who runs the Vision Express there, told me, he's quite a colourful guy, very successful business. He said, I tell all of my employees to treat everybody who comes in this store that's older than them, a lot of his employees are younger, treat them like your mum or your dad. And that's the care, to make sure the glasses are right, they look right, they don't pinch, they're polished correctly, and just the way people are treated when they're trying to make these decisions. Treat them like your mum or your dad. It doesn't sound like much, but combined with his admitted French je ne sais quoi and his talent of buying the right frames, it's meant that in the last 6 years, in 2 of those years, he's been the most profitable Vision Express in the country and has won a Vision Express Manager of the Year. And they've got 300 odd stores, so he's doing something right. So what's the essence of these 3? I've got a nice picture, my only 2x2 matrix, but all consultants are allowed 1 in a presentation. It's in the contract. But actually, it's not mine. It's a guy called Greg McEwen who wrote a really nice book called Essentialism, about boiling things down to the essence. And what he says is this: let's think about 2 dimensions, bland or inspirational versus general and concrete. And this is, think about the job of, as a leader, communicating your objectives, your intentions to your people. Quarterly goals, KPIs, are bland but concrete. You need them, of course, but they're not going to inspire anybody. They're just numbers. They're more meaningful to you, probably, than they are to them, to echo something Mark was talking about earlier on. Values, typically bland and general. Yeah, most people's values are fairly similar, however much wrangling they go through. Integrity, teamwork, people come first, customers come first, that sort of stuff. And sometimes they are credible and sometimes they're not. A good mission or vision, rather than the anodyne, we will be world class and create world leading shareholder value or whatever. But a good mission can be inspiring, although it's general. IKEA, in their vision statement, talk about making everyday lives of our customers better. I think that's kind of inspiring, in a very down-to-earth way, which kind of fits the company. Let's make our customers' everyday lives better. So it's inspirational for the right sort of employee, but it's very general. It doesn't even say that you're in the furniture business. However, when it absolutely has to be there overnight, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen, or treat my customers, our customers, like your mum or your dad, is concrete and, for the right employee, kind of inspirational as well. And it gives them a lot of guidance as to what kind of decisions to make. That's the area that we want to play in, and that's a great thing to muse about over your turkey leftover sandwiches. Just to give you a visual of this, it's almost like if you can get the right phrase, the right articulation of what you're trying to achieve, a bit like a magnetic field, it'll do all the organising of those iron filings, gives them something to resonate with. So that's the picture. And just a shout out to Greg McEwen. I might stick that up on the web page. I've done a web page for you with a few bits and pieces that you can go back and have a look at after the talk. So my first of my 3 is articulate. Too many people try and tell employees, these are the financial results we want, this is the strategy. They use business kind of language, MBA language, or language that you might use to talk to your banker, and they don't make the translation. And people don't necessarily relate. I know, because I talk to them in the focus groups afterwards, and this is what they tell me. So articulate. Quick quiz now. Does anybody know how many minutes it takes, or how long it takes, for a radio signal to reach Mars from the Earth? 30 minutes. Is that one way or both?
One way.
Oh, I was trying to send you the... it's actually about 13 minutes each way. At the moment, depends on the movement of the planets. So 26 minutes. Okay, so imagine you're an American rocket scientist or a European rocket scientist. Now we have these things as well. Building a Mars rover, and you think, okay, we'll steer this around, no problem. Stick a camera on the front, little joystick in Houston or wherever mission control is, and we can steer the thing around. But you can't, because it'll get stuck on a rock somewhere, and it'll be 26 minutes before you know it. Or it'll go over a cliff, and you won't know that for nearly half an hour, right? So you've got to build autonomy into that thing so that it can detect edges, detect where it's blocked, and steer around. This is not a humanistic, touchy-feely argument. This is the way information theory and systems just work. So, if you need a business that is agile, which is one of the popular words, it's flexible, that's responsive, to the marketplace and to customers and to resolving issues and so forth, you can't do it all yourself. You have to push decision making down into the organisation. You have to speed your decision cycles up. The world is changing so fast it would be foolish people who make predictions. I'll leave that to the top economists in the banks. We don't know what's going to happen, but we know that we're going to have to be able to adapt. And if we don't have fast decision making close to the customer, then we're going to be outcompeted by people who do. This to me is the most persuasive argument for delegation. It's not the argument that says you'll be less busy, which is an important one. It's not the argument that says you'll empower people and they'll feel more responsible, which is also an important one. It's the one that says you'll just be too slow. Now, I'm not going to go into how to delegate here because it's not a training session, and I can give you that information another way. I'll give you a web link at the end. I have a formula a lot of people seem to be able to use well to get good delegation results, which I'll be happy to share. So, you've articulated, and then you've figured out how to get delegation to work, and I can give you some hints on that in the article I was telling you about. Now what? Well, then you can't just leave them to it, because the desk, to quote John le Carré, I have a mixture of John le Carré and Charles Dickens. Dickens for us, sort of Christmas feel. Did you know that Dickens decided to read the first public reading of the Christmas Carol at the Birmingham Town Hall in 1853? And there's a guy every year who does reenact this dressed as Charles Dickens. It's on Sunday. I have no financial arrangement with the Town Hall, but it might be interesting. Anyway, there's Scrooge, played by Alistair Sim, sitting behind his desk. But Le Carré said, in a spy novel, a desk is a dangerous place from which to observe the world. If you think your business is what's represented on that spreadsheet, you might be like those Chinese girls on the bus. You might miss what's actually going on. I have a friend who's a turnaround specialist, and he says, and what I do is, when I'm called in, I go and talk to the shop floor or the customer service or the call centre and ask them, how have management stuffed this business up? Because often they know a lot of that and they're not being listened to. There's a lot of great information there. So going out and finding out. I have a nice picture here of Winston Churchill. Churchill was a member of the Amalgamated Bricklayers Union. I don't know if anyone knew that. And there was a dispute about pay when he was Prime Minister, later and after the war, about how many bricks could be laid in an hour. And he ended this discussion because the bricklayer said, we want to be paid this much, this is a reasonable number of bricks to lay in the hour. And he said, oh, I can lay much more, many more bricks than that, which ended it. There's something about knowing the business at the coal face, if you like. We're so insulated, potentially. And a lot of chief executives spend all their time talking to bankers, investors, the finance director, hiding behind their desk, and then missing the stuff that really matters. So the third of my words in this little sequence is perambulate, an older word you don't hear so often now. If you articulate, delegate and perambulate, then you'll have a lot of the dynamic that you need to have a flexible organisation that people will be more engaged in. I thought I'd draw a loop as well, just to put it in that kind of a format, to try and describe the kind of positive dynamic you can get. So if you articulate something concrete that people can grasp, because you give them a word picture, like FedEx, like the Ritz-Carlton. If you delegate, you know the Ritz-Carlton allow their frontline people to spend up to $1,000 to resolve a customer issue, just without having to ask for it. So a guy arrives at the hotel, his luggage has been lost, true story. They take him, a bellman says, don't worry sir, gets the keys to one of the hotel's cars, takes him to a shopping mall, buys him shirts, ties, pants for his meeting the next day. Works in their business, you'd have to work the economics out for yours, right? But you articulate the vision, you delegate it, then but you still need to perambulate. I love that Ronald Reagan phrase from the Cold War days, trust and verify, of course, right? But you build that trust, you coach and you adjust. Then, hopefully you can celebrate results and then reinvigorate by seeing further. There is a doom loop as well, but I thought I didn't want to go on a downer with it being Christmas. But you can imagine the doom loop, which is you don't articulate the vision, you just assume that they know what you mean when you shout at them. You don't delegate, you retain control so nobody has any authority and they don't learn to do anything and it all depends on you and you get overwhelmed. You lose touch with what's going on with customers, the results suffer accordingly, and let's not dwell on that. that's kind of my overall take. How are we doing for time, Mark?
About 4 or 5 minutes.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
Okay, we're in perfect
With
time.
Q&A.
With Q. Okay, great. It'd be really interesting because I like to hear other people's views and so on. This is my website. I'll give you the address in a minute and tell you about some of the stuff that you can get on there. Any questions about anything, or responses or reactions, or good stories that either amplify or, on the other hand, maybe counter anything that I've been saying?
I think the one thing I would point out, I've read or listened to a lot of Gerber.
Right.
And so, obviously, some of those...
This is the
companies-
email, gentlemen, right? Does everybody know about Gerber's approach? Working on the business, standardising repeatable processes, that kind of thing.
And he talks a lot about those businesses that you've mentioned. And the one thing I would say is what they've all done is they've all got employees to buy in.
Right.
And that then gives it its own results, haven't they? They've empowered the employees and got them to buy into the business, not financially, but emotionally to buy in and believe in their own business, and I think that then generates its own rewards.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And the hardest one of the things that I've suggested here is that first one, which is what's the concrete but inspirational, because that is something I can buy into. If I'm not going to get stock options, if my bonus is not tied to you hitting your KPIs or making me hit those, it's got to be more of the emotional engagement. You can use the carrots and sticks up to a point, but Mark was really eloquent on the limits of those. And so the first piece of work to do is to go, how can I formulate the proposition so that it's something that actually, because I could buy into being part of the team that gets the package there overnight. I could be one of the ladies and gentlemen serving the ladies and gentlemen. You can see that they have intrinsic reward in doing that. They enjoy it. You'll hire accordingly, and you'll see who doesn't fit. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You've got to get that emotional connection, but you've got to give them something they can grab hold of to know what they're buying into. Thanks. Time for one more?
Absolutely,
Maybe
yeah, by all means.
if there is anybody else. Any other observations?
A fairly obvious observation, but from my experience it does go back to making sure right at the start, when you put that first advert out, or you have that first discussion with a potential employee, that you're selling the vision then, and that you're using that recruitment process to get people who are motivated to want to come to work for you, but also importantly those people who really don't get the organisation not to proceed. And I think that's really important.
Yes, and I think almost you're putting, the more you can articulate that, the more you put the onus onto them to not just sell themselves to get the job, but to also be involved in the decision and match. So, a couple of things. I worked with a business where they had graduate recruiters, obviously with a large amount of commission in their remuneration package, and they were selling an opportunity that wasn't really there, and then we were dealing with the problems a year later. Another thing is, I don't know if they still do it, but TGI Friday used to recruit people, and part of that was they had to do an act. A song, a dance, tell a joke. I don't know if that's even legal under EU law now. It's too good an idea, it probably isn't. But there's something about making sure you get people who can buy into it. Some people don't want to make anybody's everyday life easier. That's a bit boring for some people, but for others it would be really like a down-to-earth, inspiring vision. So, yeah, I think you're right. Engage them in a two-way process right up front.
Your recruitment's a two-way process. They're
Absolutely.
they want to come work for you just as much as you want.
Yes.
You're making the selection choice.
Yes. Any other?
Time for one more?
Well, listen, I'm going to be around afterwards, and I love talking about this kind of stuff. So if you're going to be around for the networking and you'd like to chat, that would be wonderful. I put a page up. I called it / this is basstesker.com is my website, but I put / opus because I figured that would be the easiest way to remember. There's a few links on there. There's the delegation format I mentioned on a PDF. There's also a podcast about it if you prefer to listen. Similarly, the bit about can you motivate people and the sloth. Again, a blog post and a podcast for those who prefer to listen. And you don't have to sign up. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to give me your email address. You can just go and get this stuff. Other than that, we are coming up to 2015. And I was talking to a corporate banker yesterday who says he's really detecting a much bigger appetite now for growth, for investment, for development. So I think 2015, the conditions are looking, as good as they look, better than they look for a long time. I've noticed that in my business. I hope you have in yours. So I'd love to wish you, a really successful next year. Happy musings over Christmas. And we saw Scrooge before, but you remember what happens to Scrooge in the end. So Merry Christmas. Thank you very much.
You have been watching Andy Bass. For more from Andy, visit bassklusker.com.